If you want to play the latest games in 2025, you really need at least an 8GB GPU. And, being realistic, you probably also want one that's capable of hardware upscaling, and maybe ray tracing, though that's up for debate. With those criteria in mind, the RTX 2060 Super is about the cheapest option that ticks every box. But is it any good? This video was sponsored by AliExpress, where the Milzy RTX 2060 Super is already available for less than £190, and with my discount code you can get an additional £20 off that, or any other item of £120 or more, and up to £40 off if you should decide to splash out on something £200 or more. This offer is exclusive to UK viewers and ends on the 31st of July 2025. And what's more, you can join the Iceberg tech team to claim up to 10% cashback on your order. You could then use that cashback to get yourself the GameSir Nova Lite, an amazing value wireless game controller for PC, phone and console, with Hall effect sticks, built-in rechargeable battery, and both Bluetooth and 2.4 GHz wireless compatibility. Or if you're more of a boring, pragmatic sort, why not put that cash back towards some extra Gen 4 NVMe storage with a crucial P3+, available from 500GB to 2TB, with read speeds of up to 5GB per second and writes of 4GB per second. Use the QR code on screen now to join the Iceberg tech team, and use the links below to grab yourself a bargain. The 2060 Super is a first-generation RTX card using the same Turing architecture as the 2060 and 2070, released a few months later in the middle of 2019. The recent trend of games like Dune: The Dark Ages has made the basic 2060 fairly undesirable, and the later 12GB version seems to be priced closer to a 3060. So the Super might just be the sweet spot for gamers on a tighter budget. Being a first-gen RTX card, it's not going to be doing frame generation, at least not the AI kind, and it doesn't have the performance for path tracing, but despite that, it can actually feel surprisingly modern. DLSS means you not only have access to Nvidia's still class-leading temporal upscaling, but also ray reconstruction, which helps reduce RT noise and increase the quality of RT reflections, and that, in theory, should give it a slight edge over some similarly priced cards like the RX 6600. It also has a couple of things that make it more desirable than even the RTX 5060. In very specific circumstances. The PCIe slot is full Gen 3 X16, unlike the Gen 5 X8 of the new model. Paradoxically, this could mean more bandwidth on an older system. It shouldn't make the 2060 Super any faster than the new cards in practice, but it might erode some of the benefits you'd get from the newer GPU. Also of interest to people with a library of older games is 32-bit PhysX support, which was removed from the RTX 50 series and can seriously impact older games like Arkham City and Mirror's Edge. The card itself is another model from Milzy, who seem to specialise in GPUs that aren't being manufactured anymore. I don't know definitively where they get them from, but I do know they aren't an official partner of Nvidia or AMD. I also know that these are genuine desktop RTX 2060 Supers, and they work with the official driver package from Nvidia, which isn't something one can always take for granted. I've already mentioned Dune: The Dark Ages as a reason to pick up the Super over the regular 2060, so how does it do? Well, 8GB isn't really enough to push the quality preset over medium, and at 1080p with DLAA, that will only deliver a 30 to 40 FPS experience. Thankfully, we have DLSS, but to get to a 60 average means dropping it to balanced, and at that point I think the quality really starts to drop off too much. I'd go with DLSS quality for a 56 FPS average, but that's just me. You might want to drop the quality settings to low. Dune Awakening is a new addition to my benchmarking roster. It is a UE5 game, and to some of you that will already be ringing alarm bells. There are plenty of signs we're dealing with an Unreal game. Traversal stutter, slow loading assets on each camera cut and so forth, and alpha and particle effects seem to do a number on performance. As this is an MMO, I couldn't benchmark the same intro section without deleting my character and playing the tutorial over again, which did take a fairly long time, but I found that neither 1080p medium with DLAA or with DLSS quality was quite satisfactory. Performance was fine, I guess, averaging 41 FPS at native 1080p, though DLSS seems to have little or no impact, and there was this one cutscene where performance just fell apart, and I couldn't find a solution for this. After recording, I did go back and play the tutorial a third time at 1080p low, and that saw much higher frame rates overall, but also a lot of frame time spikes that really pummeled the 1%. Until I test this game with a better graphics card and CPU, I don't really know how fixable any of this is, and how much is just inherent to the game, but I also don't know how interested I am in finding out. Assassin's Creed Shadows is pretty rough going too, and achieving 60 FPS most of the time requires dropping to the low preset and DLSS performance, and given just how bad this is going to look in gameplay, I'm inclined to say that means 60 FPS is out of the question. The game doesn't scale too well, however. I got an average of 36 FPS at native 1080p high, and a smooth 30 plus is possible just by adding quality DLSS. So if you're not against the idea of a console-like experience, or at least a PS4-like experience, this should be just about passable. Clair Obscur is another UE5 game, but one that's a lot more forgiving of the 2060 Super than Dune is. I got close to 60 FPS wandering through the city at the start of the game at the medium preset without any upscaling, and adding DLSS solidifies that frame rate without hurting image quality too much. PS5 ports are always particularly hungry on VRAM, and The Last of Us Part 2 is no exception. Once again, I ran the game at 1080p medium without upscaling, and that seems pretty reasonable at 67 FPS. You might think, like I did, that you could get away with high if you add some DLSS, and that's kinda true, up to a point. I found that after a few minutes of gameplay at these settings, there were some massive stutters, of the kind you might mistake for the game crashing. I'd suggest sticking to medium for this one. As a game that's graphically a bit lighter weight than some of the others featured in this video, Kingdom Come 2 seems a little more amiable to the 2060 Super, averaging 50 FPS at native 1080p Ultra and over 60 FPS with quality DLSS. Which is almost exactly the same result as we can expect from Dragon Age Veilguard at the high preset. I'm not entirely in favour of using upscaling below quality at 1080p, even if it is DLSS, but from past experience I'd say you might even be able to turn on some RT in this one, if you can tolerate a render resolution of below 640p. The 2060 Super is officially the minimum GeForce GPU for Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. So what does that mean? Well, it means medium settings gives a memory warning in the menu, even with quality DLSS, and even though it can score close to 60 FPS at native 1080p. I'd suggest not going far above the low preset, which doesn't present a warning and averages over 70 FPS in the opening jungle section. Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is not a smooth ride on the 2060 Super, but then again, I'm not sure what you need to make it one. The 3060 scores about 20% higher, which is perhaps a bigger difference than I've seen in other games so far, But even that 12GB card has the same spiky frame time graph. At 1080p high with quality DLSS, the 2060 Super is a very acceptable 72 FPS on average, but traversing the city is going to see frame spikes and stutters that drop the 1% lows into the 40s, and I don't really see a good way around it. The Super barely scrapes a 60 average at 1080p medium in Horizon Forbidden West, and 1% lows are in the mid-40s. Turning even quality DLSS on is a far better experience, bringing the average up into the 70s and pushing the minimums over the 60 mark. For reference, the 3060 scored 68 FPS on average without upscaling. The 2060 Super can handle Cyberpunk 2077 quite easily at 1080p high, averaging 73 FPS in the built-in benchmark. The 3060 is less than 10% higher at 80 FPS. If you're curious about ray tracing, I'd say this isn't ideal, but it is doable. Maybe if you just want to do some sightseeing around Night City rather than actual combat. At RT Ultra with quality DLSS, it scores almost 41 FPS with lows of 32, which is about 25% less than the 3060, but that's probably because I'm using the better looking Transformer model of DLSS, which performs much worse on the 20 series than the 30 series. You'll get a few extra frames by switching to the legacy convolutional model, but you'll also get more noise and blurriness. If you want to play Alan Wake 2 on a budget PC, you don't want to play Alan Wake 2. Well, alright, that's perhaps a bit harsh, but the 3060 needed dropping to low to be playable, and the 2060 Super is no different. Native 1080p is around 45 FPS, just a couple frames below the Ampere card, and if you can stand a little upscaling, then DLSS quality can actually get you close to 60. For the right price, and the right games, the 2060 Super could be an excellent buy in 2025. The Millsy model I have here is not perfect. The cooler is not the quietest, but certainly isn't distracting, but it's also not that effective. Using the stock fan profile, temps approach 80 degrees in a 25-degree ambient room, so you'd probably benefit from repasting it with some MX4 or PTM 7950 thermal pad, or even just tuning the fans in MSI Afterburner. It is, however, just under £170 right now, and if you can't get a good deal on the 3060, which wouldn't surprise me, as people do seem to appreciate the 12GB card a lot more these days, for some reason, then this could be a good budget alternative. Compared to something similarly priced, like an RX 5700 XT, you're getting similar performance, but also access to DLSS and ray tracing, which you probably need to care about if you want to play modern games on cheaper hardware. Thanks again to AliExpress for sponsoring the video. Check out the links in the description if you're in the UK, and also join the Iceberg tech team before you shop using the QR code on screen. Thanks for watching, kindly do the usual YouTube things if you feel so inclined, and I'll see you next time.